Hi guys, in this video we're going to be learning about while loops. While loops allow us to execute code until a particular condition is met. So let's start by declaring a variable int index equals 1. While index is less than 20 or less than or equal to 20, we're going to run a particular condition. So this basically means that while the index that we have set here is less than or equal to 20, we're going to run some particular statement or functionality within here. And all I'm going to do is print out, so I'm going to use sout, which is our shorthand for system out print line, and I'm just simply going to print the index. So if I was to run this as it currently is, the application simply wouldn't stop. It would just run continuously because index is always going to be less than or equal to 20 because it's always 1. At no point within this code are we incrementing it. So if I was to run the application, you can see here that it's constantly printing out 1 to the console, and you can see the system out print line is constantly being generated. So if I stop this, what we need to do to avoid that is increment the index. So index plus plus semicolon. So we set an index and we give it a value of 1. We then start our while loop. Currently, the index is 1. 1 is less than or equal to 20. That is true. So we run the content inside the while. In other words, we print out the value of index, which at this point is 1. We then increment that index. We go back to the top of the while loop. Index is now 2. 2 is less than or equal to 20. Therefore, this is true, meaning that we print out the index, and again, we increment it, and so on, until we reach index with a value of 21. 21 is less than or equal to 20 is false because it's more. It's at that point that the while loop will end, we'll break out of the while loop, and the application will stop. So let's run the application now. And you can see here that we're printing out 1 all the way to 20. Now let's say that we only want to print out the odd numbers, and we can do that within the while loop. So I'm simply going to type if index modulus 2 equals 1. Then I'm going to put the curly braces here and right after the system out print line, and I'm going to leave a space. So for each iteration, we check if the index modulus 2 is 1. In other words, it's an odd number, and then we print out that particular value. So if I was to run the application, you can see that we print out 1, 3, 5, 7, and so on. All of the odd numbers between 1 and 20. And you'll notice here that the operation to increment the index is outside of the if. It wouldn't be right to put this here. So we keep it outside of the if statement. We want it to run on every iteration. We don't want it to run only if there's an odd number. We want it to run either way. So we keep it outside the if statement. Now let's remove this code. Now let's use a while loop with an array. So let's instantiate a string array. So let's declare a string array. So string array fruits equals, and we're going to instantiate it with some values. As the name suggests, we're simply going to instantiate it with a list of fruit names. So within the curly brackets, I'm going to add bananas, apples, oranges, pears, watermelon, kiwi, and finally, pineapple. So we have our list of fruits, and we're simply going to print them out to the console using a while loop. So let's create a variable, index, and we're going to instantiate it with a value of 0. So last time we used a value of 1, and that was simply because we wanted it to start from 1, and we wanted to display the numbers 1 to 20. However, here we're dealing with an array, and as we said before, arrays use 0-based indexing. In other words, the address of the index or the address of bananas is position 0 in the array, not position 1. Apples would be position 1, oranges position 2, and so on. So we start with an index value of 0. while index is less than fruits dot length, then we're going to perform an action, and that is to print out the value in the array. So we're going to print out fruits, square brackets, index. So let's go through this. We have a while loop, and as long as this condition is true, it's going to print out each fruit. Index is currently 0. Fruits.length is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So this would evaluate to 7 because fruits.length basically means the size of the array. In other words, 7. Index is 0, so 0 is less than 7. This resolves to true. Therefore, we print out fruits, which is our array, and this note and these square brackets mean that we want to access a particular value from the array based on an address or an index. That current index is going to be 0 because it's the first time we're running it. So it's going to retrieve the value bananas because that is at position 0. The next time we run it, index will be 1. And that reminds me, I need to add index plus plus, because if we didn't, the while loop would run endlessly until we manually stop the application. So we increment the index. The index is now 1. 1 is still less than 7. So we print out fruits value at index 1. Index 1 is apples, so it retrieves the value apples and prints that out into the terminal. So let's run the application, and you can see here that we've printed out each of the fruits in our list, bananas right up to pineapple. One final thing that we could do here is at the start of the list, we could have it display start of fruits list, and at the end of the list, we could have it display end of fruits list. How would we do that? Well, we can use the index. Between these two lines here, I'm going to leave some space, and I'm going to type out if index equals 0, then we're going to do something here. And this is basically the start of the list at index 0. So I'm going to type out using systemout.println start of list. And as it currently is, this wouldn't work quite right because on the first time that it runs, it'll first print out the fruit name, in other words, bananas, and then it will print out start of list, which isn't exactly what we want. So I'm going to move this line. I'm just going to Command X to cut and Command V to paste it underneath this if statement here. And then right after this systemout.println statement here, to actually print the fruit, I'm going to add another one. If index equals fruits.length minus 1. In other words, this is going to be the end of the list. Then we're going to print out end of list. So let's try that out. So you can see here that we've got start of list, and then we've got our list of fruits, and then we've got end of list right at the end. So our first if statement, we're checking if the index is 0. In other words, it's the first item in the list. We print out the text start of list, and then it prints out the fruit. For the end of the list, we don't say index equals fruits.length because fruits.length is 7 and our highest index is going to be 6. Because we start at 0, we don't start at 1. To check for the end of the list, we actually have to do fruits.length minus 1. In other words, the very last one, the very last index, which is 6, will equal 7 minus 1, 6. So if I was to add another fruit, for example, grapes, and I was to run the application, grapes gets added on, and the text end of list would get added on to the end. So that's everything for this video. I really hope you found it useful. If you did, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe.